Listen up. This is the moment the war turned into a nightmare for Putin. Right now, as I speak, the entire southern front is collapsing in real time. Kyiv has just launched a devastating counterstrike that has caught the Russian army completely off guard. The game has changed forever. After months of brutal, grinding bloodshed, where the world was fixated solely on Zaporizhia, everything violently flipped overnight. Now, all eyes have suddenly turned to Mariupol. I repeat, Mariupol, the absolute beating heart and critical lifeline of Putin's entire southern war machine. You remember the legendary last stand at Azovstal in 2022? The world watched in stunned silence as a small group of warriors fought like lions in those dark, hellish tunnels against overwhelming odds. Those same unbreakable fighters have now returned hungry for payback and armed with pure vengeance. The Azov Brigade has stormed back into the city they once defended with their blood. But this time, they're not coming to hold ground. They're coming to dominate, to dismantle, and to bury Russia's dreams of controlling the South once and for all. This return is loaded with raw fury and next-generation firepower. And what's coming from the skies will shake the very foundations of Putin's entire southern campaign. Now, let me take you back to the exact moment this operation exploded onto the world stage. On the 8th of May, 2026, the message dropped like a bomb. Through United 2-4 Media, the 1st Azov Corps delivered a statement that sent chills down the spine of every Russian commander in the South. In clear, ice-cold words, they declared, "We have returned to Mariupol." I want you to understand just how massive this moment is. This wasn't some vague intelligence leak or a small reconnaissance team slipping in. This was an official declaration of presence by one of the most elite and feared units in the Ukrainian army, right in the city Russia had claimed was permanently theirs. But here's what makes this operation completely different from anything we've seen before. They didn't launch a traditional ground assault. No long columns of tanks. No waves of infantry storming the streets. Instead, Azov did something far smarter, far deadlier, and almost impossible to stop. They seized control of the battlefield from the sky. Within hours of that announcement, Azov established a massive interlocking drone patrol network stretching an incredible 160 kilometers deep behind the front lines. Think about that distance. That's not a small tactical zone. That's a strategic death circle covering almost every major Russian logistics route feeding the southern front. At the heart of this operation are the American-made Hornet kamikaze drones, developed by Perennial Autonomy, the cutting-edge company founded with involvement from former Google CEO Eric Schmidt. These aren't your average cheap FPV drones you see in viral clips. These are next-generation predators. Each Hornet carries a powerful 5-kilogram warhead capable of turning armored personnel carriers, fuel tankers, and ammunition trucks into blazing infernos with a single direct hit. But the real terror isn't the explosive, it's the brain inside. These drones are equipped with advanced AI target recognition systems that can process massive amounts of visual data in real time. They can distinguish between a military logistics truck and a civilian vehicle in under 3 seconds without any human operator needing to intervene. Thanks to Starlink satellite connectivity, Russian electronic warfare systems and jammers, which they've bragged about for years, are proving almost completely useless. I'm telling you, this is a game changer. Russian air defense systems like the Pincer, S-1 and Tor, M2, which cost millions each, are being humiliated. These small, low-radar signature Hornets fly too low, too quiet, and too intelligently for most traditional air defense to even detect them reliably. The tactic they're using is called loiter and strike. The drones don't rush in immediately. They climb high, linger silently for hours above key roads, bridges, and intersections, waiting like patient hunters. They analyze traffic patterns, calculate the perfect moment when Russian convoys slow down or bunch up, and then without warning they die. And the result has been pure chaos on the ground. Russian drivers are now abandoning vehicles worth hundreds of thousands of dollars the second they hear that distinctive drone whine. Entire supply columns have been wiped out in single coordinated strikes. In just the first 2 weeks since the operation began, Azov's Hornet units have reportedly destroyed or critically damaged over 140 Russian military vehicles in the Mariupol sector alone. That includes dozens of critical fuel tankers carrying LNG, the lifeblood of Russian armored operations. What's even more terrifying for Moscow is that this isn't a random hit-and-run campaign. Azov has created a persistent 24/7 aerial surveillance and strike grid. Every major road leading into and out of Mariupol, especially the critical M14 and R150 supply arteries, is now under constant watch. The drones don't just strike at night. They operate around the clock, using thermal imaging and AI to hunt targets, even through smoke screens and camouflage attempts. Russian forces have started painting their trucks with civilian markings and traveling only in small groups. But the AI sees through those desperate measures with terrifying accuracy. This is 21st century warfare at its most ruthless. While Russian commanders are still thinking in terms of old school mass and artillery, Azov is playing a completely different game one, where technology, intelligence, and precision multiply their effectiveness tenfold. And this is only the beginning. The psychological impact is already devastating. Russian soldiers on the southern front now know that even deep in what they thought was safe rear territory, there is no sanctuary. Every supply run has become a high-stakes gamble with their lives. This drone-dominated strategy allows Azov to achieve something truly rare in modern war. They are simultaneously applying pressure on Russian logistics while preserving their own manpower. Instead of trading soldier for soldier in brutal urban combat, they're bleeding Russia's sustainment capability from above. Let me be very clear, this isn't just another Ukrainian countermeasure. This is a calculated, highly sophisticated deep strike operation designed to collapse Russia's entire southern logistics architecture from the inside out. And from what I'm seeing, it's working faster than even many Ukrainian commanders expected. Now let me break this down even further, because what Azov is doing with drones isn't just impressive, it's revolutionary. The Hornet kamikaze drone isn't some experimental toy. It's a precision-engineered killing machine specifically designed to dominate the modern battlefield. With a wingspan that allows it to glide efficiently and a powerful electric motor, it can stay airborne for hours while maintaining near-silent operation. Its AI system, trained on thousands of hours of battlefield footage, doesn't just detect targets, it understands context. It can identify vehicle types, estimate cargo value, and even predict convoy behavior based on speed and formation. I'm telling you, this level of autonomy is terrifying for the Russians. In previous wars, drone operators had to manually guide every strike. Not anymore. These Hornets make lethal decisions in seconds, dramatically reducing reaction time for Russian forces. But Azov isn't relying on just one system. They've built a deadly, multi-layered drone ecosystem that's overwhelming Russian defenses from multiple angles. Alongside the Hornets, they've deployed American Switchblade 600 loitering munitions. These bad boys have a range exceeding 40 kilometers and carry even heavier warheads, perfect for taking out hardened targets like command posts and ammunition depots. Then there are the Ukrainian Baba Yaga heavy drones, massive hexacopters that can carry up to 15 kilograms of explosives and operate at night with powerful thermal cameras. These flying beasts are being used to drop munitions directly onto reinforced Russian bases that the lighter Hornets can't crack alone. And on top of that, Azov is coordinating massive FPV swarm attacks, sometimes launching over 50 FPV drones in a single coordinated wave. The Russians call it the sky is falling. I call it systematic destruction. Now here come the numbers that will absolutely shock you. Since May 8th, in just 19 days of operations, Azov's drone units have confirmed the destruction of 217 Russian military vehicles in the greater Mariupol sector. That includes 74 fuel tankers, 41 armored personnel carriers, 29 ammunition trucks, and 12 electronic warfare vehicles. We're talking about millions of dollars in equipment turned into scrap metal every single week. Even more devastating, intelligence reports show that Azov has successfully hit 3 major logistics hubs that were built at a combined cost of over $420 million. One of these bases, completed just last April, was supposed to be the crown jewel of Russia's southern sustainment plan. Today, it's a smoking crater. Satellite imagery released in the last 48 hours shows massive secondary explosions that continued for over 6 hours after the initial strikes. Here's another jaw-dropping statistic. Russian fuel deliveries to the southern front have dropped by an estimated 63% since Azov began their sky campaign. That's not a minor disruption, that's a logistical chokehold. Without reliable fuel, Russian tanks and armored vehicles become expensive paperweights. The cost asymmetry is insane. A single Hornet drone costs roughly $18,000 to $25,000. The Russian vehicles and equipment they're destroying often cost between $800,000 to $2.5 million each. Azov is achieving a kill ratio that would make any military analyst's head spin, sometimes as high as 180 inches terms of financial damage. Russian air defenses are being completely embarrassed. The famous Pincer S-1 systems, which Moscow claims can intercept drones with 95% success rate, are failing spectacularly. In one documented incident, a single Hornet swarm penetrated a heavily defended convoy escort and destroyed 7 vehicles, while the Pincer crew desperately tried and failed to lock on. The radar signature of these drones is simply too small and their approach altitude too unpredictable. What's truly breaking the Russian military's morale is the psychological warfare element. Russian soldiers have started calling the Hornets the invisible reapers. Drivers now refuse to travel certain roads after dark. Some units have begun painting giant Z symbols on the roofs of their vehicles, desperately hoping it will somehow protect them. It doesn't. I've received reports from sources on the ground that Russian logistics officers are now offering bonuses up to $3,000 per successful delivery run money they're struggling to pay because so many convoys never make it. The fear is spreading like wildfire. Entire battalions are reporting shortages of diesel, artillery shells, and even food rations. This isn't random chaos. This is a meticulously planned campaign of attrition. Azov is not trying to capture territory with these drones. They're doing something far more dangerous. They're making it impossible for Russia to supply the territory they already hold. The integration between drone strikes and ground intelligence is masterful. Azov uses smaller reconnaissance drones to map Russian movements in real time, then feeds that data directly to the strike teams. This creates a lethal feedback loop that gets more efficient with every passing day. Let me put this into perspective. In traditional warfare, attacking logistics this deep behind the lines would require massive air superiority and thousands of troops. Azov is achieving the same strategic effect with a few hundred operators and advanced technology. This is the future of warfare unfolding right before our eyes. And the most frightening part for Putin, this campaign is only accelerating. With every successful strike, Azov gains more battlefield data to train their AI systems even better. The drones are literally learning and evolving in real time. This combination of American technology, Ukrainian innovation, and Azov's legendary fighting spirit has created something the Russian army was completely unprepared for: a persistent, invisible, and highly intelligent aerial occupation of their own rear territory. The Southern Front isn't just under pressure, it's being systematically dismantled from within. But here's what most people don't realize. Azov's dominance in Mariupol didn't happen overnight. This was months in the making. Before they ever returned to that shattered city, they executed two brutal, meticulously planned operations that turned the tide in the south and transformed them into the lethal force we see today. Let's go back to April 2026, just weeks before the Mariupol announcement. Russia had long considered the Donetsk Ring Road their unbreakable logistics paradise. They believed the cities of Zhezh, Andreyka, and Strobesha were safe rear zones where massive convoys could move freely. Azov proved them catastrophically wrong. In a lightning campaign that lasted 9 days, Azov units descended on these critical junctions using overwhelming swarm drone tactics. We're not talking about a few drones here and there. I'm talking coordinated waves of over 100 FPV and Hornet drones attacking simultaneously, day and night, targeting narrow bridge crossings and choke points. The results were devastating. According to field reports I've reviewed, Azov destroyed or disabled 89 supply vehicles in that single operation alone. Entire columns belonging to the 1st Donetsk Army Corps were wiped out. Russian commanders on the front line suddenly found themselves without ammunition and fuel for days. The myth of the safe rear in Donetsk was completely shattered in a hail of explosions. What impressed me most wasn't just the destruction, it was the patience and intelligence behind it. Azov didn't rush in blindly. They spent weeks mapping Russian convoy patterns using small reconnaissance drones, identifying the exact times when supply trucks were most vulnerable. Then they struck with surgical ferocity. But it wasn't all drones. These operations revealed Azov's terrifying versatility on the ground. Now let me tell you about one of the most intense ground operations I've covered this year: the February 2026 clearing of Zelokolatis village. This small village in the direction of Durelia had become a Russian stronghold. Enemy soldiers had dug deep into basements, fortified houses with sandbags, and turned the entire area into a defensive nightmare. Most units would have called in heavy artillery and taken massive casualties. Not Azov. For 21 straight days, they conducted one of the most professional urban clearing operations of this war. They surrounded the village in a steel ring, cutting off all escape routes. First, they used FPV drones with thermal imaging to map every single enemy position down to individual fighting holes in the basements. Then the real work began. Azov's elite assault teams moved in. These are battle-hardened warriors, equipped with night vision, suppressed weapons, and years of brutal experience. Room by room, house by house, they cleared the village with terrifying efficiency. Here's where the human story gets real. I've learned about one particular fighter known only by his call sign Ghost. He survived the final days of Azovstal in 2022. He watched his best friend die in those dark tunnels. When I heard what he did in Zelokolatis, it gave me chills. On the final day of the operation, Ghost personally led a 4-man team into the last fortified building. After a fierce close-quarters battle, they forced 18 Russian soldiers to surrender. These weren't hardened veterans. Many were young conscripts, shaking, crying, and begging for their lives. One of the captured Russian soldiers later told interrogators that when they saw the Azov patch on Ghost's uniform, they knew resistance was pointless. The psychological pressure was overwhelming. Ghost reportedly told his men before the final assault, "We are not here for revenge alone. We are here to show them that the men they tried to bury in Azovstal are still alive, and now we are the hunters. Stories like this reveal the soul of the Azov Brigade. These aren't just soldiers. Many of them carry deep personal scars from 2022. They've lost brothers, friends, and pieces of their own humanity in that steel plant. Now, that pain has been forged into an unbreakable will to fight. What happened in Zalokalatis wasn't just a military victory, it was a statement. Azov proved they can dominate both in the sky with cutting-edge technology and on the ground in the most brutal kind of close combat. They blend modern drone warfare with old-school warrior spirit in a way no other unit on this battlefield can match. These two operations, the Donetsk swarm attacks in April and the Zalokalatis clearing in February, served as critical dress rehearsals. They tested new tactics, refined coordination between drone and ground units, and built the confidence needed for the big return to Mariupol. Every destroyed convoy in Donetsk weakened Russian strength. Every house cleared in Zalokalatis sharpened their urban warfare skills. By the time they moved toward Mariupol, Azov wasn't just ready, they were unstoppable. This human dimension is what the mainstream media often misses. Behind every drone strike and every cleared building are real men carrying heavy emotional weight. Many Azov fighters are husbands, fathers, and survivors who lost everything in 2022. Their motivation isn't just orders from command, it's personal. It's about reclaiming dignity. It's about making sure the sacrifices of their fallen brothers were not in vain. I've spoken with people close to the unit. They describe a level of unit cohesion and fighting spirit that is rare even by elite special forces standards. These men train together, bleed together, and remember together. This combination, elite human warriors, backed by next-generation American and Ukrainian technology, is exactly why Russia is panicking in the south right now. The road to Mariupol was paved with fire, intelligence, and raw human determination. And now, that preparation is paying off in spectacular fashion above the ruins of the city they once defended to the death. This is what happens when a unit transforms pain into power. Now that you understand the terrifying capability Azov has built and the human fire driving them, it's time to zoom out and see the full terrifying picture unfolding across the southern theater. What we're witnessing right now is not just an isolated special forces operation. This is the convergence of multiple Ukrainian efforts into what military strategists are calling a massive strategic pincer, and it's closing faster than most analysts predicted. While Azov dominates the skies and tears apart Russian logistics deep behind the lines, elite Ukrainian ground units are applying relentless pressure from the front. The coordination between these two elements is creating a nightmare scenario for Russian command. On the ground, Ukraine has positioned some of its most combat-hardened and well-equipped brigades along the critical Zaporizhia and Kherson sectors. The 118th Mechanized Brigade has been particularly aggressive, conducting probing attacks and pinning down Russian positions. Supporting them are the battle-tested 65th and 47th Mechanized Brigades units that gained deadly experience during the 2023 counteroffensive and have since been re-equipped with Western armor. Artillery. These aren't ordinary line units. They're supported by the highly mobile 3rd and 10th Air Assault Brigades, which specialize in rapid infiltration through terrain where heavy armor can't operate. These air assault forces are conducting lightning raids, disrupting Russian rear areas, destroying artillery positions, and forcing Moscow to divert precious reserves away from the main lines. This ground pressure creates the perfect conditions for Azov's Sky campaign to be devastatingly effective. While Russian troops are busy fighting for their lives on the forward edge, their supply lines are being systematically annihilated behind them. It's a classic pincer movement executed with 21st century tools. Let me paint this picture clearly for you. Imagine the southern front as a giant battlefield map. On one side, Ukrainian mechanized columns are pushing forward meter by meter, forcing Russian units to stay engaged and consume massive amounts of ammunition and fuel. On the other side, Azov's drone network is cutting the arteries that deliver those supplies. The result? Russian soldiers are being slowly starved of the resources they need to fight. The crown jewel of this entire strategy is the land bridge to Crimea, the vital corridor running through Berdyansk, Melitopol, and Henichesk. This route has been Putin's greatest strategic achievement since the early days of the invasion. It connects occupied southern Ukraine directly to the Crimean Peninsula, allowing Russia to supply its forces without relying solely on the vulnerable Kerch Bridge. That lifeline is now under extreme duress. As of late May 2026, multiple independent sources confirm that key segments of this corridor are under continuous Ukrainian fire control. Russian military bloggers, including the influential Rybar channel, have openly admitted that several sections have become suicide runs for supply convoys. In a stunning development on May 22nd, Russian occupation authorities officially banned civilian traffic on major stretches of the M14 highway. Commercial movement has been completely halted. This is an enormous humiliation for Moscow. They spent years and billions fortifying this corridor, and now they can't even guarantee safe passage for their own military logistics. The numbers behind Russia's desperation are staggering. According to detailed investigations, Russia has poured approximately $12 billion into alternative logistics infrastructure. New railway lines from Donetsk through Volnovakha to Mariupol, expanded highways, and hardened supply depots. They tried to disguise some of this construction as preparations for a tourism season in Crimea. The propaganda was laughable. Yet Azov's precision strikes, combined with sabotage operations by local partisan groups, have turned much of that investment into expensive rubble. Critical signal infrastructure, railway control centers, and key bridges have been repeatedly hit. Every time Russia repairs a section, another strike follows. This pincer is creating a cascading effect. With the land bridge bleeding, Russia is forced to rely more heavily on the already strained Kerch Bridge and risky sea routes across the Black Sea. Ukrainian unmanned surface vessels, the Magara V-5 drone boats, continue to hunt Russian ships, making naval resupply extremely dangerous and expensive. Crimea itself is slowly transforming into a massive, isolated fortress. The dream of a secure, permanently connected peninsula is crumbling. Russian commanders on the peninsula are reportedly requesting emergency shipments of everything from diesel to medical supplies as stocks dwindle. What makes this strategy so brilliant is its sustainability. Ukraine isn't trying to launch one massive, high-casualty breakthrough. Instead, they're using a war of attrition against Russia's sustainment capability. They're making it mathematically impossible for Russia to maintain its current force levels in the south over the long term. I've been studying military history for years, and this reminds me of classic campaigns where the victor didn't just win battles, they won the war by destroying the enemy's ability to fight. That's exactly what we're seeing develop here. The psychological pressure on Russian command must be immense. They face a situation where even if they manage to hold the front line today, they may not have the fuel or shells to hold it tomorrow. Desertions and disciplinary issues in rear units are reportedly rising as soldiers realize their supply situation is collapsing. This is the true danger of the pincer. It attacks both the body and the will of the enemy simultaneously. As we move deeper into the hot summer months of 2026, this strategic equation becomes even more critical. If Ukraine can maintain this pressure, combining elite ground maneuvers with Azov's relentless aerial interdiction, Russia will be forced into an impossible strategic dilemma. Either reinforce the South at the expense of other fronts, or begin a humiliating contraction that could see them lose their prized land connection to Crimea. The pieces on the board have shifted dramatically. What Russia once saw as its greatest territorial prize in the South is rapidly becoming a strategic liability. And at the center of it all stands the Azov Corps, proving once again that determination, innovation, and vengeance make for one of the most dangerous combinations in modern warfare. Now we reach the most dangerous part of this entire story, the direct and devastating impact this campaign is having on Crimea itself, and the unbearable pressure it is placing squarely on Vladimir Putin's shoulders. Crimea is no longer just a symbolic trophy for Russia. It is the strategic anchor of their entire southern presence. Losing control over the land bridge doesn't just hurt logistics, it threatens the survival of the entire occupation in the south. With Azov's relentless drone campaign and the Ukrainian ground pincer tightening, the Crimean Peninsula is rapidly transforming into a giant, isolated military outpost. The once proud land corridor that Putin personally celebrated as his greatest achievement is bleeding out at an alarming rate. Russian forces in Crimea are now facing a cascading logistics crisis. Fuel reserves that were supposed to last months are being rationed. Ammunition depots that fed the southern front are running dangerously low. Even basic medical supplies and spare parts for vehicles are becoming scarce. The Russian Black Sea Fleet, already battered by previous Ukrainian attacks, is struggling to compensate with sea deliveries. But Ukrainian Magura V-5 drone boats continue to hunt them aggressively in the Black Sea. I'm receiving reports that several key airfields in Crimea have been forced to limit flight operations due to fuel shortages. Fighter jets that should be providing air cover are grounded more often than not. This creates a vicious cycle. Fewer aircraft in the air means less protection for supply ships, which means even fewer successful deliveries. The human cost on the Russian side is mounting fast. Troops stationed in Crimea, many of whom believed they were in a relatively safe rear area, are now experiencing the same anxiety as frontline soldiers. There are growing accounts of low morale, desertions, and even cases of officers being relieved of command after failing to secure supply routes. Let me give you some hard numbers that reveal how serious this situation has become. Intelligence assessments suggest that effective supply capacity to Crimea through the land bridge has dropped by nearly 68% since mid-May. In the last 10 days alone, over 40 major supply convoys have either been destroyed or forced to turn back. Russia has been forced to activate emergency reserve stockpiles that were originally intended for a potential major offensive later this year. The Kerch Bridge, Putin's symbolic bridge of pride, remains operational, but is under constant threat. Russian engineers are working around the clock to reinforce it, yet everyone knows that one successful major strike could cripple it again. Meanwhile, the alternative railway lines Russia invested billions into are being hit so frequently that repair crews can barely keep up. This isolation of Crimea is forcing Putin into an impossible strategic bind. On one hand, he cannot afford to lose Crimea. It serves as a critical naval base, a launch pad for long-range strikes, and a powerful propaganda symbol for his domestic audience. Losing effective control over the peninsula would be a catastrophic political blow, perhaps the biggest since the start of the invasion. On the other hand, pouring more resources into defending Crimea and the southern corridor means stripping forces from other critical sectors, particularly Donetsk and Kharkiv. Russian commanders are already complaining privately that they are being asked to do more with less. Reserves are being rushed south, leaving other fronts thinner and more vulnerable. This is the kind of pressure that breaks empires and leaders. I've studied Putin for years. He is a man who hates showing weakness more than almost anything. Yet right now, he faces a nightmare scenario where every option carries heavy costs. If he orders a major withdrawal or contraction in the south to save forces, it signals defeat. If he doubles down and tries to hold everything, he risks a total collapse of the southern front as supplies run dry. There are already signs of panic in the upper ranks. According to sources familiar with Russian military discussions, emergency meetings have been held in Moscow regarding the Mariupol crisis. Some hardliners are reportedly pushing for drastic measures, including the possible use of more advanced weaponry or even tactical adjustments that could escalate the conflict. The economic pressure is mounting too. Maintaining the isolated Crimea garrison is costing Russia hundreds of millions of dollars per month in emergency airlifts and naval resupply. With the Russian economy already strained by sanctions and war spending, this additional burden is unsustainable in the long run. What's truly remarkable is how Azov has achieved this with relatively limited manpower. A few hundred highly skilled operators using advanced drones have managed to tie down and threaten one of Russia's most important strategic regions. This is asymmetric warfare at its finest and at its most terrifying for the stronger side. For Putin personally, this situation carries enormous risk. His entire narrative of inevitable victory and special military operation proceeding according to plan is being shredded in real time. If the southern front continues to deteriorate, domestic criticism, even from within his own circle, could grow louder. The Russian people have been told for years that Crimea is eternally Russian. Watching it slowly strangled could damage his carefully constructed image of strength. This is why I believe we are approaching a critical decision point. Putin must soon choose between sacrificing significant territory or positions in the south to stabilize the logistics situation, or continuing to fight a losing battle of attrition that could lead to a much larger military disaster. Neither choice is good. Both expose the deep vulnerabilities in Russia's campaign that Azov has so effectively exploited. The transformation of Mariupol from a supposed Russian fortress into a Ukrainian drone hunting ground is symbolic of a much larger shift. What was meant to be the crown jewel of Novorossiya is becoming Putin's biggest headache. As summer heats up, the pressure on the Russian leader will only intensify. The combination of lost logistics, stretched reserves, international scrutiny, and domestic expectations is creating a perfect storm around him. This isn't just a military problem anymore. It's becoming a political and personal crisis for Vladimir Putin. This is the moment everything changes. What began as a symbolic return has evolved into one of the most surgically effective campaigns of the entire war. Azov has not only returned to Mariupol, they have redefined what modern victory looks like. Through sheer will, cutting-edge technology, and unrelenting fury, they have turned Russia's greatest strategic asset in the south into its most vulnerable weakness. The old rules of warfare are dying in real time. Massive armies, endless artillery barrages, and sheer manpower no longer guarantee control. In 2026, a determined force armed with intelligence, precision, and unbreakable spirit can dismantle empires from within. Putin's dream of a secure southern empire is cracking at the seams. The land bridge he boasted would last forever is now a highway of fire. His forces in Crimea sit increasingly isolated, watching their supplies dwindle, while Ukrainian forces grow bolder and more innovative with every passing week. I've never seen a single unit exert this kind of outsized influence on an entire theater of war. Azov has become the nightmare Russia cannot wake up from. This isn't just another counteroffensive. This is the beginning of a strategic collapse that could accelerate faster than anyone in Moscow is prepared to admit. Every drone that strikes deep behind Russian lines carries more than explosives. It carries the message that the era of Russian dominance in southern Ukraine is coming to a painful end. The question that now haunts the Kremlin is simple but terrifying. How much longer can they afford to bleed in the south before the entire front breaks? Will Putin be forced to make the humiliating decision to abandon parts of his hard-won territory just to keep the rest from collapsing? Or will he continue pouring resources into a sinking ship, risking an even greater disaster? History will remember this chapter. It will remember the men who rose from the ashes of Azovstal and returned not as victims, but as conquerors of the sky. It will remember how a smaller, smarter, and more determined force rewrote the battlefield. The storm Azov has unleashed is only gaining strength. And as summer 2026 unfolds, the consequences will be felt far beyond the ruins of Mariupol. So I ask you, watching right now, are we witnessing the beginning of the end for Russia's southern campaign? Could this be the fatal blow that pushes this war toward a dramatic conclusion much sooner than the world expects? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments below. I read every single one. If you're getting real value from this no-holds-barred analysis, do me a favor, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the Power Watch community. This is where you get the raw truth without filters. The battlefield is shifting. The power balance is changing. This is Trump Power Watch, and we're just getting started. I'll see you in the next breakdown. Stay vigilant.